All right, and we're back with another episode of NX Office Hours. I haven't been on the show in a while, so I got
Little
to get
rusty.
used to rusty. Got to get used to getting back in the flow of things. But I'm glad to be here again. You've seen me before, Brandon Roberts. You see my handle on Twitter there. Uh, Today, like I said, NX Office Hours. We talk about all things NX within various ecosystems like Angular, React, and the community. And today I have with me Devin Shoemaker. Devin, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure thing. So I'm a software engineer currently at Ionic as of a few months ago. Really happy about kind of starting a new adventure at that job. Before that, I had been working on NX plugins for quite a few months, basically since you guys kind of announced the whole plugin initiative.
Mm-hmm.
And most of my plugins have revolved around Ionic stuff. So I made a plugin for Ionic React, Angular, Capacitor, and so I'm sure we'll get more into that as we go. But that's really what's been keeping me busy lately.
Oh yeah, last time we spoke, I know when last time we spoke, I think we only had Ionic React that you were working on at the time, and of course you said you expanded since then. So definitely interested to dive more into that. Um, but yeah, like I said, main focus we're talking about today, or things that we want to cover, is NX plugins, and which you have written a few of those. And for those who may not know what NX plugins are, they are a set. They are a way to extend an NX workspace. Um, Extend an NX workspace to build your own type of thing, build your own things on top of it. So the NX workspace has things called builders, or I should call them executor. We have executors and generators. Um, so we have a suite of those, and we also have some community plugins where that's where you have a lot of the, or that's where you have the ones that you started out with, and we have a growing list of ones there. As you see here, we have uh, Ionic React and Ionic Angular and Capacitor that we'll talk about, and even Firebase. So if you want to learn more about building plugins just in general, you can go to the NX community page. And we also have a guide that I just displayed a second ago about how to create plugins themselves. Um, so yeah, let's get into that. What you said you jumped on the NX plugin train. I think pretty early, I believe, because
Hmm.
we put the plugin system out there because at in the beginning we just mainly just had the NX Core plugins, NX Core plugins, which is the ones that are maintained by the rest of us at folks at Narwhal, which have dedicated support for Angular, React, and React Native, to name a few, but other things. And then, like I said, we wanted to extend that and kind of build an ecosystem around that. And you jumped on that. So I guess how the things like how did you start getting into building plugins for NX and kind of progress that over time to where you are now?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's kind of a funny story to it. It kind of all goes way back to NX8 in the announcement. And with
Mm-hmm.
NX8, you guys had broken down the core libraries to be more feature and framework or tooling oriented. And like the head title of that blog post might have been like pluggable package structure or something to do with that.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that
I'm sure
time,
it was something catchy.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So at that time, I immediately piqued my interest, and I was like, I wonder if people are going to start building plugins. You know what I mean? Like if the API is not too difficult or weird, I can imagine people like extending this in some way. And I
Mm-hmm.
didn't see a whole lot on it. There was a couple of things, like I had seen like XPlat or CrossPlat. I'm not sure how to say that, but that's a
Yeah, that one's been around for a while.
yeah,
And I think they had been one of the early, I call them early adopters of NX also, as far as. But I think they had more of a, I want to say it was more hand rolled as far as what they
hmm
were building on top of NX at the time.
Right. So that was about the only thing I had seen, and it didn't, like you were saying, I guess it didn't really fit like what I was thinking it could be.
Hmm.
And at some point, I just had been writing some Ionic React apps in NX, and essentially took a Narwhal React app and did the 12-step process to convert it to my Ionic app.
Hmm.
And I'd done that a couple times, and I'm like, okay, somebody's got to figure out this plugin thing. And so I started digging in the NX source code, thinking I might fork the React package or something. And that's when I stumbled upon the Create NX plugin CLI that was yet to be announced.
Ah,
So
yes, I see.
you guys were working in open source. I found this package and I didn't really say anything. And I was like, well, it's published in beta.
Hmm.
So I just pulled it down, started working, and it seemed like exactly what I needed to kick off a brand new plugin. You guys did a good
Hmm.
job from even pre V1. And so my project has been around since before you guys even officially announced the whole thing.
Okay, so I see what's going on here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
We're
definitely,
trying to out here hiding in plain sight, and you're like digging in, like, okay, I see what's going on.
yeah,
Digging
I
through
mean,
source code to put things together, putting the pieces
in
together.
general, in general, my, curiosity does get the best of me. I find myself digging through, you know, projects code all the time.
Hmm.
But luckily enough, like things were laid out well enough and were kind of, your guys' plugins were really good examples of, how to build this stuff. I don't think NX was not built with NX at that time yet. Now it is, right?
No, yeah, it wasn't built with NX at the time. So yeah, we were still doing it with a bunch of different like scripts and things to kind of build everything together. But yeah,
Hmm.
once that finally landed, it made it a lot easier for even us just internally just to be able to dog food our own thing and make it better too.
Yeah, no doubt. So even though at that time NX wasn't built with itself, the plugins that were available were really good examples, and I was able to kind of follow the lead of a lot of what you guys were doing,
Hmm.
and I was able to crank out the first plugin. And I think that the day that you guys kind of announced the whole approved plugin list
Hmm.
deal for the CLI, I know I was the first person to submit a plugin, and I believe I did it on the day you announced it because I just put this thing out and I was like, oh yeah, sure.
You just had it all ready to go
Oh
on day one.
yeah, the stars were aligned with the timing on all that. It was pretty serendipitous for me, but
Hmm.
yeah, so that's kind of how everything kicked off. And since then, I've just continued working. I've learned so much about both kind of the Angular schematics, generators, and builder stuff, and the abstractions that you guys have built on top of all that.
Hmm.
Now learning about generators and executors, which would be a nice change of pace, I think. So, yeah, just kind of it's kept my attention for, I don't know, it's been almost a year now that I've been working on this stuff really regularly.
Okay, so it's been a year since you initially released the Ionic plugin,
I,
or a little
I know
over.
it's been a year since I at least started working on it, but
Okay,
I might have released it. I think I released it in either February or March. So we're coming up on a year, which is
okay.
pretty exciting. This is the first project that I've put out in the public, not for a business in a long while.
Yeah. So how is the reception about the like you started out with just the React plugin with Ionic? So how's the reception been since you put it out there? Is it like your first project? Was it like the first open source project where you're actually like having to work issues and
Yeah.
things like that, or you put some other stuff out there also?
No, I mean, yeah, I've done a lot of little things, but nothing that I've really supported like this.
Hmm.
Mostly like very small sites or something like that. So this is the first time that I've kind of grown somewhat of a user base, and it's been really nice because it's grown. It's grown really gradually over time in a way that has been very easy for me to manage.
Hmm.
And luckily, I haven't really had any negativity
Hmm.
involved. Usually, people are real happy with how quick I can even just answer questions because the load is very maintainable for me right now. So I'm pretty thankful for that all around. One interesting thing is that with Ionic React, it's the other plugins have kind of gained popularity a lot quicker. And part of that, I'm sure, is because I've already had these out there. But I believe that so much of the community, the React community, if they're going to be doing cross-platform development, React Native, I think, is still a more popular choice as opposed to like the Ionic capacitor route. So I think that was maybe an accidentally good choice. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
I'm feeling
you
I'm
don't have
missing
to. The support, like you said, the support burden is a lot less if I don't say the community is smaller, but there may just be a larger community in a different area, like when you started at least.
So, like, it feels good to kind of still fill a need or kind of a void in the ecosystem, while also, not jumping into something that's gained so much attraction that it's, not become fun anymore or become difficult to manage. So it's been a really fun ride so far.
Well, good. That's good to hear. So, as far as you mentioned React, like React Native versus Ionic React, what made you? I guess you already had previous experience using Ionic, so you kind of lean in that direction, or did you have did you have a chance to where you were working with? I guess you had to choose between the two, or you just kind of always are naturally gravitate toward Ionic.
Yeah, I've used Ionic for around 3 years before I started joining, or before I joined them, and I've really liked them just for a variety of reasons. I think React Native is great and solves a certain kind of need. Ionic is a little different. My biggest thing for me is that I actually used Ionic because I used to be a primarily back-end engineer, at a time. I try to be, yeah, try to be full stack as much as I can. I enjoy kind of touching a little bit of everything. But I was primarily a back-end person. I was not very confident in my skills, and I actually used Ionic because it was pretty easy for me to pick up and make really good-looking designs while still being able to work on my, HTML fundamentals. Where React Native, you get some of that. You're still kind of working with JSX and whatnot, but it's not the same. You're not working with DOM elements and whatnot. So I really like just the ability to, build that experience. And then as I've gone on, I still have that I built upon all this HTML knowledge over time that I just never got that into React Native personally.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of a preference with what I like to do, not necessarily about
one versus the other. Yeah, just one that kind of fit the need and the way that you wanted to approach building things, right?
Right. And over time, I just really liked the community. I, followed it more and more. I really liked the direction they were going. I thought their investment in web components to support the different frameworks out there was a really awesome decision. And obviously, now I'm working there. So in general, I've liked the community. I've liked the people, and, I stayed gravitating towards them for a while. So.
Yeah, definitely some. You definitely joined some good company over there. I don't know everyone over there, but I know a few people, and all of them are great from my interactions with them. So you definitely got a good thing over there.
Yeah, it's been a really incredible start. I've been here for 4 months now, and I just feel like I fit in. I think the people here are great, like you said. It's just been an awesome experience so far.
Good. So, as far as I guess walk me through, you started with the Ionic React, and you basically had to fork a plugin. You basically had to fork an existing plugin at the time to build that one because the plugin system was pretty much just being launched at that time. But now you've kind of gone through this iteration about four times now, as far as in total, just creating plugins and things. So how has that changed over time? Because if I remember correctly, when you initially released the plugin for Ionic, it was more like a single package, and now you've kind of moved to creating more plugins and kind of created like a suite of plugins that are just built on top of NX itself. So how has it changed since you launched initially before moving on to creating the other plugins?
Yeah, so at first I did fork the NX repo and try to like start hacking away at the React plugin. But like I had said, when I found that CLI to generate a new plugin monorepo, I kind of switched gears with that. And luckily, as I was digging through code, I pretty quickly realized that I could piggyback on schematics and essentially like extend them. So a schematic or a generator might be like, okay, I want to import the Narwhal React plugin and execute the application generator, right? And so luckily with what you guys have done and how everything is built out and, you know, the architecture of everything, I was able to use your code that has already been battle tested a lot more than something I'd be able to write. And then I was able to make my modifications from there. And that's actually still how the Ionic React and the Ionic Angular plugins are both made. So I start out with NX's version of Angular and React as a base, and then I build on top of that.
Okay,
And
so it's less thing. I guess in a way, it's less things for you to maintain also because, like you said, it's an extension point that you can build on top of as opposed to having to roll it off from scratch, right?
Absolutely. And I think that's definitely like been a huge value add for me because as you guys provide migrations to update things, whether it's dependencies or some code, then my users can benefit from all of that. And now I've actually, with the recent release of my plugins, I'm actually kind of staying in line with the NX versions, at least the major version, to help kind of convey the compatibility and build around that so that I can ensure like, you know, my users can safely use all the work that you guys have done. And then I have to worry about the magic on top to, you know, make it easier for
go from there.
users. Yeah, exactly. So things haven't changed too much. I would say, actually, I think I have learned a lot. And I think I learned, you know, how to not bite off more than I can chew to an extent. So I have simplified my approach to things a lot. There has been some things that there used to be some workarounds, whether it was a Webpack config change or a couple other small tweaks that I had to make in order for Ionic to work. And since then, the NX core or the NX React library has taken these things upstream. And so now I have to do less and less to actually tweak things, which is nice.
Yeah.
And the one other major thing is over time, I used to try and support all the different CSS implementations that you guys do and all the different configuration options. But
good luck. No.
Yeah, I had to backtrack some of that, and I haven't seen any negative reactions yet on that. But you guys do a lot. So for me, you know, most of the change of my plugins over time has been more on my end and simplifying the approach and kind of focusing on like what am I trying to deliver, right? Which is kind of I also am like beholden to a little bit of Ionic and a little bit of you guys. So I'm trying to find that mix that I can handle, you know what I mean? And I can you know, use my time wisely to deliver as much value to those users as possible.
Right, because you, like I said, over time, you want all things to remain in a maintainable way, like for you and for your users. Just having to maintain like a suite of packages that other people like depend on, because you know some people may depend on them for hobby projects. Some people may depend on them for like their actual job if they're using NX within a monorepo and have different native apps in there and depend on that support that you provide there also. So it's definitely a balance to be had there. But you seem like it like you said, it's moving along well right now. So hopefully you'll keep that even balance that it as far as your users and yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that sometimes it's hard to keep in mind is that in the same way, I guess I extend off of your guys's plugins, someone could do the same for mine, right? And
you're gonna have plug-in inception here after a while. So like,
right.
I built on top of NX, and you're building on top of my plugin, and somebody's building on top of that. It's like how many layers up the
right?
How many layers up the stack are we gonna go?
Generators are going to start taking a while to run. Too many of these.
Yeah, definitely. So Okay, so if I'm I guess how is the discovery being of your NX plugins being like if I'm an Ionic React if I'm a React developer, like how do I how have you found that people have discovered your plugins as far as using them in their own projects?
I mean, I think a lot of it has just been Google, really.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't really kept track of how I would show up in Google search ranks, but I do have a website that I kind of host my documentation, my blog updates for, and stuff like that for all my plugins. So I think a lot of people kind of find out about it through there. Um,
So
and I
did you build that yourself also, or you kind
uh,
of
so
put some things together for that?
here's your inception. I actually used a different community plugin for building Docusaurus apps in NX to build my documentation site.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah, I think the kind of Monorepo, the org name for those guys is NX Plus. And
Mm-hmm.
so they do the Vue plugin as well, the Nuxt plugin, and they've got a Docusaurus plugin I at least know of. So I thought it would be kind of cool. I saw that that plugin was out there, and I was like, well, could battle test a different NX plugin. You know what
Mm-hmm.
I mean? Give them some feedback, and so that's been kind of fun to use. Um,
Yeah, I've been wanting to try out Docusaurus. I haven't. I've only looked at it a few times, but I haven't been able to, like I said, try it and test it out on any actual projects yet. But it looked pretty straightforward to use. But like I said, I have to spend some more time with it to see how to put things together with it.
yeah, well, I mean, if you ever have a minute, feel free to run through my website. I've only added Markdown files, and I think it looks killer. It looks like a pretty modern documentation site with a lot of the UI elements that you expect. So
Hmm.
I know it's made by Facebook, right? I think they maintain that tool.
Yeah, I think that. Yeah, I think believe so.
So they've done a really good job with it. This was my first exposure with it, and I was able to get up and running in about 10 minutes. And so I
Hmm.
figured, what the heck, let's just roll with this. I've already got a site.
Yeah, and it's it's built on top of React also, so I'm there's some familiarity there, right, with that you can use.
Yeah, and I think you can do a lot to customize a site, but it's got really good Markdown and even MDX support built in.
Hmm.
So you could just start writing Markdown files and configure maybe your sidebar or whatever in the documentation, and you're off to the races. So I really like how they have a lot of flexibility where yeah you can get into it, the React side of things, and tweak whatever you want, or just start out with a killer template, you know.
Hmm.
And honestly, I haven't customized it too much because I think there's a sense of familiarity when people go to this because it looks like so many other documentation websites, especially
Hmm.
like the ones that come from the Facebook team, because I think a lot of them use Docusource now. So,
Yeah, I've seen a few of the other ones, like even just Redux Toolkit. They I
mhm.
think they use Docusaurus. Even I think the React Redux docs are built with it also. And I've seen it here and there in other places also that use it. So yeah, it looks like it doesn't definitely has a common look and feel and things that you can like point to like dark mode. It seems like a pretty easy thing to do with those sites also.
Yeah, so I've really enjoyed it. I think that anyone kind of looking for something like that, if it fits your needs, you know, if you're at least know some React, or if you're in an NX kind of workspace and need a documentation site, the plugin works pretty well too.
Okay. Let me check. I'm gonna bring up the site here really quick if I can get the right tab up here. To just show, kind of look through. It does. Like I said, definitely has that Docusaurus feel, but which I like. I would just put that up front. I do like that kind of thing that they give you and let you get up and running. And like I say, you just drop some markdown files in there, and you can get running from there
Hmm.
with the markdown support and code snippet copying. Even that looks like that. All the stuff is like out of the box there.
Yep.
and then
I
you
didn't
have
do anything to
your
customize
set
any
of
of that.
commands with the plugins here. So you have like I said, you have Ionic React, and uh, well, I guess the first question is, what made you what made you extend beyond Ionic and React to other platforms? Like you have Ionic Angular support now, you have Capacitor, and from looking at the site there, you've added Firebase also. So what made you, like I said, what made you start with Ionic React, and then I think you did Capacitor next after
Mhm.
that. So was it something you needed, or is it just something you? Well, I guess you build most things out of need, essentially, in the beginning, and then kind of move on from there. So what made you extend beyond just the Ionic React one?
Well, I mean, I think Ionic has traditionally been really popular in the Angular crowd.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, we've seen some good success with Ionic React since it's launched. I think it's been received really well, but React Native still has a really good strong hold on that market right now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so there was a lot of people asking me about Ionic Angular and when it was going to come out. Um, and I kind of figured I was going to do it eventually, but I wanted to make sure that I had a really uh, good hold on just plugin development with the Ionic React side of things. Made sure I was doing things the right way.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of took some time to like let that mature. And then I can't remember exactly when it was, but there was a moment where I was kind of like, okay, I think I'm ready to like take on this other plugin. And honestly, I'd waited too long because with everything I learned, I cranked it out
Mm-hmm.
10 times quicker than I thought I would. Um, so that was fitting, I kind of wanted to do it anyway because I thought it'd be cool to support all the different frameworks that Ionic
Mm-hmm.
does as well. And, there was definitely a demand for it. So it felt good to kind of like get that out there and see a lot of like good reception. I definitely, the Angular crowd came out in waves on Twitter when I finally released that. So
Mm-hmm.
it felt good.
Yeah, that's it. That seems to be something that's kind of happening. I don't want to say across the board, but in many different areas. It's like I said, Ionic was more traditionally started out with Angular, kind of built an ecosystem around that, and then kind of branched into React and other areas. Vue, they have Vue support now.
Hmm.
So just in the same way that they expanded, you kind of expanded in that same direction to support that. As far as like the Ionic React and like the capacitor is that like an underlying piece of the Ionic React package, or why? I guess
No.
are
So
they two totally separate things?
yeah, so capacitor is totally independent, right? Capacitor is kind of like Ionic's new alternative to Cordova and PhoneGap and stuff. And you can really think of it just like a really lean tool to kind of compile your web app, your build files. You take like your build output with Angular, or React, or whatever, and
Mm-hmm.
you can convert that to a native application, which is basically a native application with a single web view that runs your app. And Capacitor also lets you get access to a lot of native functionality through kind of their plugin system,
Mm-hmm.
and they have a lot of their own plugins to tap into the camera or geolocation, and there's also a good number of community ones out there as well. So that's really like the native layer of Ionic. And so like now you can kind of think of the Ionic framework more of a component library, if you will. So you kind of
I
got
see.
like the native look and feel over here, um, also providing like a lot of like native transitions and kind of some native navigation, like being able to swipe from left to right on your screen to navigate
Mm-hmm.
backwards in an app. That's kind of on the framework side of things. And then Capacitor, which is totally independent, will bundle that all in. So kind of like actually putting it on the device and getting access to device features.
Mm-hmm.
And so what's really nice about that is when I created the Capacitor plugin for NX, Capacitor actually does work with theoretically any app that you would have in NX. So you could take a stock Angular app. You could take, I haven't tried it, but you should be able to take a Vue app with the community plugin and
Mm-hmm.
build native experiences with that. So I really wanted to make sure that was an independent plugin that could be used in
I
a
see.
non-Ionic way.
So you could just take just a vanilla, just basically any vanilla application and turn it into a native app that way pretty easily, right?
Mhm.
With capacitor in your plugin is what you're saying, right?
Yep. And like I said, Ionic does do some extra stuff. If you use the combination of like Ionic with capacitor, you get some extra niceties on top. But like, there's nothing stopping you from taking an Angular app with Angular material that looks already like a really, almost native experience if you like
Mm-hmm.
Material UI in general, and then you could put that onto a mobile app on your phone or whatever.
Yeah, I that's usually my go-to is material when I try to build something, at least in Angular anyway. Material, or even the times I looked at React things, I was like, "Where's material? I need."
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm doing if I'm not using material, but
Yeah, I know what you mean.
definitely have been doing something, just kind of testing around with React things, but I haven't had a chance to put those two things together to see what it can do there.
Yeah, Material UI is also a really nice project. I've used that before. Um, I'm obviously a fanboy for Ionic and whatnot, and I think they do some pretty good stuff.
Hmm.
So like, you can't go wrong with either of those two decisions. I think they're both great UIs if you wanted to hop into something that looks and feels like what you're used to already.
Hmm.
Um,
So what kind of differences? Because as you mentioned, I guess you can do this in a like one off repo where you can just have an Ionic project. You add capacitor and build your native apps or your PWAs or things based off of that. So what kind of things? I guess what are the differences that you use with your plugin, like within the context of like an NX workspace or in that kind of scenario?
like, what kind of like what benefits could I see my plugin actually giving
Yeah.
kind of in a workspace in Monorepo thing? I
Or
mean,
is it more or less making the building process easier or?
yeah. So there's two elements to that because I've thought a lot about this before. In a lot of ways, I excuse me. I really like using NX to build even single applications
Mm-hmm.
because of the tooling you guys provide. So if you want to spin up a Ionic app with capacitor and storybook and prettier, et
Mm-hmm.
cetera, et cetera, NX is going to be a pretty easy way to get you there just because um, I'm adding the Ionic flavoring on top and you guys already have all that provided for React, which
Mm-hmm.
is kind of another benefit of extending a lot of what you guys do, right? Um, so that's kind of you at least get that if you just use this in an NX workspace as opposed to like having a single app with the regular Ionic CLI.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And
if you want to,
I would think you get a little more consistency across apps too, especially if maybe you have an Angular and a React, projects in the same workspace, as opposed to having them in like separate repos where you're probably using a different CLI in both of them, and kind of that way, so you get more consistency across the usage also.
right, yeah, exactly. And I think there's a lot of scenarios where, um, maybe you have a client-side app and then you've got your admin portal, right?
Mm-hmm.
In this case, you might not even be sharing much UI or anything like that, but there's probably some models, interfaces, maybe some APIs that you're sharing. And so you could put that in an X workspace and start to leverage some of that, right? And maybe that's
Mm-hmm.
just API contracts starting there. Um,
Contract. Who needs API contract?
I know,
Change the back end without changing the front end. Nobody does that, right?
yeah, I know you're an Angular developer. I know you like typing. Can't lie to me.
You're right. I like TypeScript, and I like having those two things be connected in that way, so that if
Mhm.
somebody else breaks it, then I know that it was broken, so we
Yep.
can hopefully fix it before it reaches someone else.
Yep. And then something I want to like demo a little bit more that get some like example applications out there. I'd like to show off some like reuse of the UI with like
Mm-hmm.
maybe a dedicated desktop web app and then a more mobile focused one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes a mobile app doesn't always scale quite to a web, and maybe you want to use something like Next.js for the web or something that's a little different than what Ionic comes with out of the box, and you
Mm-hmm.
want to share some of that UI. I think you could really scale that pretty far potentially if you built things out right. You could probably reuse many pages and stuff like that across your applications, and here soon you could have an iOS app, an Android app, an Electron app,
Mm-hmm.
and a PWA web app with server-side rendering sharing a ton of code, which is
Right.
also something not to knock React Native, but because I know there's like React Native for web out there and stuff like that. I don't have too much experience with it, but you don't really get that level of code sharing with
Mm-hmm.
that. Because again, this is all just web technology. We can fall back on what we like, share as much code as we can, and scale up in that manner. So that's kind of the whole reason why I really wanted to start this whole plugin thing too, because I thought like cross-platform applications combined with a monorepo sounds like a killer combination.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like you mentioned at the beginning, like XPlat, I think that was or is their big play as far as being able to have all those cross-platform apps in one place, and like I said, yours builds on top of that same idea of
Mm-hmm.
you can have this NX workspace that has 5 different types of apps in it and they could be from different ecosystems, and all they would all be there together and not mess with each other if they don't need to, right?
Right. Yeah, and honestly, I think I know that I've been reached out to by a couple people who either ask questions or just like kind of thank me for stuff, and it looked like they worked at some rather large companies, or
Mm-hmm.
consulting places. But I have yet to actually see an app at scale with my stuff yet. So I'm kind of looking forward to that day where someone comes to me with something bigger than what I've built, and is like, here's what I'm using your plugin for, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, then you're gonna get into you're gonna have a page of companies on your Docusaurus or your doc site where you can show that there the places that have
Yeah, there you
used
go.
your plugins that built on top of that to build something else, which would be pretty cool, I must say.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'm ready to take sponsorship money, but at the same time, with how much I spend working on this,
Hmm.
yeah, figure something out at some point here.
Yeah, that would definitely be an avenue worth pursuing. I think. Uh, so you've gone React Angular capacitor, and you just added Firebase. So what
Mhm.
was you added the NX plugin for Firebase? What was the motivation behind that one? Because I guess it's I don't want to call it the same thing as capacitor, but it's more something that you're building on top of something that's already there. So
Mhm.
what kind of things are in the Firebase plugin and what led you to put those things together?
That one was my own needs, really.
Mm-hmm.
So I like to use Firebase for a lot of my side projects. I think it's awesome just to get things spun up real quickly. And
Well, I guess we should.
Firebase,
I guess we should talk about what. Explain to me what Firebase is, even though I'm wearing a
yeah.
Firebase T-shirt.
Yeah, sure. So Firebase is basically a backend as a service provided by Google. So they do authentication, data storage, document storage, cloud functions, all kinds of stuff. Um, think of it as kind of like AWS, but packaged in like a more streamlined thing. And they've
Mm-hmm.
got a really good free tier that's really generous, especially if you just want to have a side project where a lot of times I just fire up a project with Firebase just because I want to learn, right? I want to
Mm-hmm.
interact with data. I want to save data, but maybe I'm learning Next.js or playing around with Tailwind to build a new UI or something, right? I like to use it just to have an API available and not worrying about you know building something from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
You mean spinning up like a little JSON server?
I mean,
isn't it enough? No, I'm
yeah,
sure you probably
easier than ever
could.
now, but still.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
if you're definitely if you're comfortable with Firebase and what it adds, then it makes it, like I said, it makes it easier to just spin up things and build on top of those. Especially if you already have like a set of core data that you kind of use for learning or maybe demo apps and things. Probably get you up and running quicker than that.
right. So yeah, going back to like why I made the plugin and what my plugin really does with Firebase, right? Essentially, Firebase has a CLI that controls a few things. You can deploy uh, updates to your application live if you're using the hosting feature.
Mm-hmm.
You can update cloud functions if you have some custom, Lambda-like things going on. If you want to change your database rules for kind of, authentication and securing your data, you can do all this stuff from the CLI, but it's not
Mm-hmm.
exactly monorepo friendly. And
Okay.
so ideally, you would have to like cd into your application folder, execute the command from there. Not a huge hassle, but when you're used to NX being so nice and not ever having to actually do that,
Mm-hmm.
it was a little annoying. So I just had a thought, and I was like, I bet I could whip something up that all it does is interface with the Firebase CLI, which I'm using a builder slash executor
Mm-hmm.
from you guys called run commands. That's essentially all built around just executing things from the CLI, potentially in parallel, or you know
Yeah, the
just
run command is definitely like the Swiss Army knife of
yeah,
the NX plugin tool belt, I should say. Just so
yeah,
you can do is basically at that point you can extend it to do whatever you want to with run commands there, which is what most people do when if they are just trying to get familiar with, or like I said, you already have an existing stack and you have a lot of scripts already that you want to kind of integrate in with like the affected commands and things like that. And run commands definitely work great in that area.
yep, no doubt. And I could have just put a blog post out with the right custom run commands to add to your workspace.json. But I
Mm-hmm.
figured it would be easy enough to whip up a plugin that just kind of does it for you. And I know this isn't going to be a big maintenance overhead, right?
Mm-hmm.
And even with the way that I've designed the plugin, I didn't have to make a custom workspace target for every Firebase command. I
Mm-hmm.
just added an option called CMD, so you can pass in
Oh,
whatever
okay.
Firebase command you want. So hopefully it's just like here's an easy interface with Firebase from the root of your NX project. Have at
Mm-hmm.
it and do what you want with it.
So do you uh, you just build it on top of run commands there? Do you have any besides that any schematics or generators that you're using as far as like Firebase functions or anything like that? Or are you still kind of that's still on the developer to kind of generate or work with those things? Because maybe there's not a lot of effort there. I'm not totally sure.
Yeah, I had someone reach out to me that I've known on Twitter for a little bit, and we were chatting about this because he kind of asked about that too. Like,
Mm-hmm.
are you going to add any schematics to maybe generate a library in your NX workspace for cloud functions or something like that? You know what I mean? So then you can easily deploy it. And I think that's totally on the table. I haven't worked with cloud functions in particular, so that's something that I got to go investigate before I can really make sure I develop a solid feature around it.
Yeah.
But talked about that whole maintainability thing earlier.
Yeah,
So
that's true. Because once you make it public API, then then you're kind of beholden to support it
right.
also, and definitely want to take some research and time to make sure like you're comfortable taking on that load. I suppose before other people start using it.
Yep. So, that's still a possibility. I may end up, updating that in the future. But right now, the only schematic is basically the one that sets up your workspace.json to be able to run these builders for whatever project you want, right?
Hmm.
So you will have to run it like per project. So it's not like a global thing, obviously. It's just like any other kind of schematic. You usually have to target the project.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, that's the main thing right now. So I just kind of figured, I think I can get this done. Let's get something out that's really lean and maintainable that I don't feel bad about, investing time in the future and
Yeah, it
or
sounds
right
like
now.
you sounds like you have a lot of ideas. Just I feel like you're just holding back. You're just holding back from us all these projects and
Well,
things. But I totally understand why that would be the case.
the hard thing is that a year ago when I started this plugin development, I did it so that I could develop an app that I wanted to do in an NX workspace.
Hmm.
And I've spent that whole year developing more plugins and not developing the
Not
app.
that.
So,
Yes.
that's
I'm
the
gonna
trap I
build.
think a lot
I'm
of
gonna
us
build
fall.
an app. First, I must build the platform to build it.
Yeah, and I can't complain because it's honestly, especially with this past year, it's kept me really busy and, actually been something really nice in the whole really down tempo side of things for the
Hmm.
past many months. So I've had a lot of fun and it's kept me busy. So no complaints, but that's also why I hesitate to take on too much in terms of like something I'm putting out there in the public because
Hmm.
I also don't want to make anyone else's day more difficult. I know how that is too.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely understand that. Uh, but yes, you're already putting out some awesome things already, and feel free to take your time to before putting out anything else. I said this before, or I said it in the chat, but if you have any questions for the people in the chat, feel free to ask them. Uh, one person said it would be nice if they do a Firebase base config and then per project extended just like ESLint. I did make Tailwind have its custom extended per app for my global configuration. Uh,
Hmm.
so yeah,
That does sound interesting. I'm not sure if the Firebase CLI does that, like supports that.
supports like extending configs in that way.
Yeah. I mean, it's possible I could do something on my side of things to, I guess, programmatically, inherit Firebase.json. I think it's a really good idea.
Hmm.
I
Tell
might
them,
take
just
that
tell
back.
it. You should open an issue, or
Mhm.
you should either open an issue or a PR. I think those are the two, the two paths that you could
And,
potentially take.
yeah, and also, I enabled GitHub discussions on my thing yet, and I have yet to really use that. So if you
Hmm.
have an idea that, I mean, it would also help me validate ideas that are worth investing in if I can actually see the amount of interest and attraction. So yeah, whether that's like an issue or a discussion, um, having something out there to be able to look on and gain interest would be really helpful. So,
Hmm.
but it sounds really interesting.
Yeah. Let's see. We had a couple more questions. I'll look through here and see if, and maybe feel free to chime in on these, um, because you have different packages in your monorepo or your workspace. So this one probably is applicable there. Is there a best practice of generating changelog and version management? And under this one, I don't. I guess because you have. Well, I guess I'll add the lead-in question. All your packages are on the same. You run the same version for all of them, or do you run them independently?
So I've switched to keeping the same major version, but I
Hmm.
do release them independently.
Okay.
And I will admit, this is not my strong suit. Um, I had tried using a couple tools before for kind of managing my change log, but it just didn't seem to play well with NX and
Hmm.
everything. I know like Lerna has some built-in kind of like change log maintenance stuff. So, um, you know,
Yeah, I
I
think
don't know. I don't know if it's.
there's.
Oh, go on.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I think there's some. I think someone actually created another plugin for that also
Yeah.
that helps you if you want to version those things independently of each other, as far as releasing, uh, and that releasing packages and things lets you do that. I think there was a custom plugin, another custom plugin that did that.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I heard about that. I haven't tried it yet, so I need to because last time I went and did this, that wasn't out yet. So if that can help me solve my problem, that'd be great. Right now, I
Hmm.
just manually make change logs because I'm not releasing that many things.
Hmm.
Um, so I manually make my change log, cut my release. Pretty old school about it.
Yeah, which like I said, if that you do what you can for now, and then like I said, if the tool gets better, then you can switch to that, switch to something that makes that a little easier in the long run.
Yep. For me, it was kind of one of those things that when I started playing around with this, I found myself spent like a couple hours um, investing time and trying to get something to work well, like the way I liked it. And I was like, well, I could have done a dozen releases. So
Hmm.
I'm gonna put that on the back burner for now.
Yeah, yeah. It's like you can spend a lot of time trying to get something working, or you could just do it and move on for now.
Hmm.
Definitely a trade off to be had there. Let's see. I think we got one more, at least I have one more question in the queue here. Trying to migrate to a monorepo, struggling to understand how to version my apps in a way that's easy to communicate changes. And I think this is more or less along the lines of like you have a lot of libraries and things in your workspace, uh, and teams need to be impacted by those change or need to be notified about those changes. Uh, One thing that I've seen or done is if you're using like GitHub or something like that, and you have like your team names within the GitHub repo, then you can associate those teams with you kind of add metadata to your like NXJSON to identify who those teams are for those affected projects, and then you can turn around and put that as like a comment in a PR that change that gets updated when you create that PR. So it adds a comment, it adds those teams so they can be notified, or even if you're going a step further with um, like using code owners to where you can notify particular teams about which files have changed. That would be another way to do that.
Yeah. Well, and I think that um, depending on how you're using your monorepo setup, right? If you're publishing these things to npm and consuming them that way, it's going to be a little different than if you're all sharing the libs within the monorepo and taking those changes immediately, right?
Hmm.
I think as your project scales, if you do have to make a breaking change to some kind of function in a library, then all of those consumers are going to be immediately, I guess, notified.
Hmm.
Um, so maybe there's some kind of strategy that around like versioning certain libraries. Maybe like there's a V2 style
Hmm.
uh,
Because you
function or
can have,
whatever.
yeah, you could have buildable libraries within your workspace also
Mhm.
that you could kind of version, not necessarily version those, but uh, they kind of consume a particular version of that you've built inside of the workspace. That might be an option also.
And I think certain libraries and features are probably going to be more easy to be flexible with those breaking changes. Some that are, what I mean, whether like a legacy project is using that as well, that's going to be really hard to update. So I
Hmm.
think you just kind of got to like take it situation by situation. Um, I think that personally, if you're kind of starting all in on the monorepo stuff, I think that updating everything immediately, kind of in the typical NX fashion, right? We're all sharing all the code, right?
Hmm.
At build time, we're not worrying about publishing or having to like pull down updates for these libraries within the monorepo. Just kind of like working up through those breaking changes earlier and often are going to probably
Hmm.
like set the right tone.
Yeah,
Instead of like package updates.
yeah, definitely like the single version policy that we kind of recommend in projects, where you have one version of that and everybody moves along that version as far as like I said, keeping up with upgrades and same sort of thing there to make that process easier when you do have to change things around, and you're not running into, oh well, maybe we can stay on the old version until we have more time to until we have more time to update, but then that make things more difficult in the long run. So
Right.
definitely good. Want to keep that pattern going there.
Yep. I totally agree.
Yeah, so I think on that we'll start to wrap up there. Also, first of all, again, thanks for coming on. I got to get these plugs in. I think you already had your handle there in your name there, but I believe I got that. Is that correct?
Yep.
There,
Looks
Par-
good.
Paranoid Coder on Twitter. Like I said, Devin works at Ionic now. Definitely some good people over there. Uh, I'll post links to these in the chat here in a second. You got nxtend.dev, where he has his blog and plugins that are written on top of NX that you can check out for at least 4 packages now, and more as he sees fit.
Yeah. We'll see.
Yeah.
You never
So
know.
we're gonna keep going with that. As we mentioned before, we have nx.dev, where you can go to our documentation site and figure out how to make your own NX plugins. We showed at the beginning of the show that we have like a growing number of plugins and plugin authors that are constantly growing the NX ecosystem. And
Yeah, it's been awesome to see all that happen over the last year.
Mm-hmm.
It's really cool.
Yeah, definitely so. And of course, you can follow NX Dev Tools on Twitter, and probably by following NX Dev Tools, or if you add NX Dev Tools, you'll probably see us hop in your mentions, maybe whether they be good or bad. If you have you want to show some love to NX, or even if you're having issues with NX, we follow those channels there. So definitely check that out. And I think on that note, we'll call this one a wrap. If you are a NX plugin author, additional other plugin authors, we definitely want to reach out to you and get more plugin authors on the show to talk about the things that they have developed. So I know we have you on. We've talked to B-Man, who's like done a lot of plugins also. So definitely want to get some more of the plugin and community people on to talk about cool stuff that they're building with NX. Yeah.
Thanks for having me on again. It's been a fun time. If you ever need me back on here, just holler and I'd be happy to join.
Okay. Good to hear. On that note, we'll see everyone later. See ya.
Peace.